Hello everyone. This is Orlando from A Collector's Dream. And today I want to talk about two players and show two cards. And these are two players that have very interesting histories and really are players that, have made history. And people don't know too much about them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is, of course, I've shown this before, Armando Marsans. And Armando Marsans was one of the first Cuban players to play in the United States. And Marsans, he actually went to college in the United States, went back to Cuba to play baseball, and played baseball with Rafael Almeida. And Almeida was one of the top players during the day, and he was drafted by Cincinnati. Cincinnati went and wanted him to play in the team. So Marsans, who knew, I'm going to get it close up here. Marsans knew English. So he went along really as an interpreter to Almeida. So when they both went, and he played baseball also, so they actually ended up that both of them, Almeida and Marsans, were both signed by the Cincinnati Reds back in 1911. He was 23 years old, and his first year he batted .261, and then the second year he batted .317. And he was 18th in the MVP voting at 24 years old. In 1913, he batted again .297 and was also was 24th in the MVP voting. So he was a pretty good player for Cincinnati. He never really was a star, but he played for 8 years. And ended up with a lifetime batting average of .269, and really was the first Cuban player to get 500 hits. I think the first foreign player to get 500 hits. This was back in the 1900s, 1911 through 1918 he played. And, he ended up with over 2,200 at-bats, and really was in the top 10 in batting average in the National League for a little while there. He was a center fielder, and he was a teammate of Eddie Grant and George Sisler also. And he was the first Cuban-born player, again, to get 500 at-bats in the big leagues, followed thereafter by Dolph Luque. And he was the Reds' opening day pitcher. So we'll take a look at the back here. It says the first native-born Cuban to break into the major leagues, Armando Marsans and Rafael Almeida, who joined the Cincinnati team mid-season 1911. Marsans is the son of a wealthy resident of Havana and comes from an old Spanish family. He learned to play the game in Cuba and came to the United States in 1910 as a member of the New Britain team of the Connecticut League. The following season, he was sold to the Cincinnati team and has since played outfield positions for the Reds. He is a splendid fielder and has a great throwing arm. In 1911, Marsans batted .261 and fielded .968. This is Recruit Little Cigars, And this is the 1912 card of Armando Marsans. So that's why it has the stats from 1911 on the back. So it's a Little Recruit brand, and that's Armando Marsans, really the first Cuban star. And one of the most important things that he did, and it was recognized in Baseball Magazine in September 1914, they published an article entitled "The Famous Marsans Case," calling his jumping to the Federal League one of the most important of the test cases in baseball law. He jumped to the Federal League. He didn't want to, he was one of these players. in Cuba it was a little bit different. The way they played, of course, with blacks and whites playing together, and they didn't have the type of laws here in baseball. So he comes here and he wants to switch leagues and stuff. So he had to go to court to fight, control of the managers of the teams. So in those days, to relate it to today's day, it's similar to Curt Flood. Let's put it that way. And Curt Flood is kind of relatively bit ignored for what he's done. But he was the first guy that really fought, for free agency. And Marsans did the same thing back in 1914. But just think about, what Curt Flood went through. And Curt Flood literally was almost blackballed. The teams, they pretty much his career was ended because of that. But he did open the doors, and he helped all of that. And Marsans was the one that, before Curt Flood, it was Armando Marsans. So that's a little thing I want to share on that. And the next player I want to talk about is George Mullin. And George Mullin was also an incredible player that really people don't talk about. The Detroit Tigers team back in the early 1900s was one of the dominating teams, especially from 1907 through 10, 11, was when Ty Cobb came as a rookie. And George Mullin was their ace pitcher. Well, I won't call him their ace, but he was their workhorse pitcher. He was an incredible pitcher during those days. He ended up winning over 228 games. And I'll share some of his stats in a minute there. I just want to take a good look at the card and take a look at George Mullin, that old uniform he's got on there. So George Mullin had a WAR of 47.6. He won 228 games, and his lifetime ERA was 2.82. So the reason he wasn't the main pitcher, he was this number 2 pitcher, was because they had Bill Donovan. And they called him Wild Bill Donovan with the Tigers. And he was their star pitcher at the time. And he went on, he had an incredible record. But George Mullin, when you talk about early careers, early baseball, these two guys were important. George Mullin really was one of the first guys that started saving games. And not only saving games, but he was what you call a workhorse, the type of pitcher that would be used almost every day back in those days, in double headers and things like that. Mullin, he was so famous that he was one of the best guys that he came out in ads. And you can see here, Coca-Cola ad from 1910. Talking about George Mullin, and he came in 1901, and he pitched 367 innings. I mean, think about that, with a record of 21-20. And so he was signed, and then he made his debut in 1902. And the thing with him is he pitched a lot of innings. His records weren't that great. I mean, 13-16 and 19-15 and things like that. But here's a guy that he pitched so much that he was the American League wins leader in 1909. He was also the winning percentage leader in 1909. He was the saves leader in 1903. He was the American League's the most innings pitched leader in 1905, complete games leader in 1905. He had 15 wins where he had 9 seasons where he had over 15 wins. He had 5 seasons where he had over 20 wins, and he had 1 season where he had over 25 wins. So, incredible pitcher, but when I say workhorse, Think about this. He had 12 seasons that he pitched over 200 innings. And he had 6 seasons, 6, that he pitched over 300 innings. Come on, 300 innings is a ton of innings. And this is an American Caramel card. So I'll show you that. Baseball subjects of 100, series of 100 subjects. And that's an American Caramel card of George Mullin. And again, he had 47 WAR. I'll read off a few of his stats here so you can see here. He led the league in 1905 with 347 innings pitched, and he had 35 complete games. I mean, that's incredible. There was one year he was in 1909, he was 29-8. So the thing with George Mullin is that he was a little bit wild. And his situation was that he had an awesome fastball and he had a great curveball, but he just couldn't throw strikes sometimes. So he led the league in walks 4 years. So that was his downfall, and that's why he didn't win as many. Even though he won 228 games, he lost 196. So he was the workhorse, but he led the Tigers to the American League Championship in 1907 and 1908 and 1909. I think 1910. I got to look it up again, but he was just a great player. So 2 guys. I wanted to share a little bit of history. That 2 guys, 2 players that you don't hear too much about. But Armando Marsans, first Cuban player, one of the first Cuban players, along with Almeida, that fought against the establishment like Curt Flood did, and sued the league to move to the Federal League, and won. And George Mullin, pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, the American League, their workhorse, led them to American League championships, won over 200 games. 6 years, he pitched over 300 innings. So 2 guys that, this is what I love about the old baseball, the history. If you go back and you read on some of these players, they accomplished so much, and some of them really are kind of ignored. You're talking about a pitcher that pitched with a WAR of almost 48, and another outfielder that made history as far as the free agency. So wanted to share those 2 guys with you and just give you a little bit of background. So I hope you learned something today. And these are 2 different cards I wanted to share with you guys. So thanks for watching, guys. This is Orlando from My Collector's Dream. Have an awesome, awesome day. And I'll catch you on the next one.